Paul, during the pandemic, just 1 year after launching Mind Architect, he had become the most listened to educational podcast in Romania.
At that time, I need to confess, it was the most listened to podcast in Romania, period. It still is the most listened to educational. For I think 3 years or 4 after its launch, it was the most listened to podcast in Romania on podcasting platforms like Spotify and iTunes and stuff. And I want to put it on the record for me to remember the good days when, it was before video content, just audio, and the quality of the conversation made them have good traction.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? Because it's often harder to make audio only spread like it did Mind Architect. And kudos to you guys.
And thank you very much. I feel the need to say this wherever people introduce me in the Mind Architect context, that it wasn't planned. And from my point of view, speaking about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial journey, I don't think is reproducible necessarily. I don't think it's something that I could recreate if I wanted to now. It was a context, less, similar productions on YouTube, the pandemic, which made people very interested in understanding their mind, their brains, their anxiety, how to manage it, so on and so forth. Plus a lot of years of talking about those topics in training contexts, in the physical world, in my training practice. All of them combined, plus the luck of having some partners that wanted to do media production, which I didn't know how to do. So, like Captain Planet, by our powers combined, that happened.
Yeah, look at the results, right? But speaking of the result, because all that success that you had, quote unquote, overnight, it looked somehow from the outside, right? Like you build this media company, education company, and so on. But I want to hear what was really happening inside you during that period.
I'm going to try to sum it up. So, in terms of professional mission and vocation and alignment with these things, it was a very good amplifier for things that I already wanted to bring to the world. I've been doing training and coaching in the corporate context as a freelancer for, I think, 6 years, doing solopreneurship before launching Mind Architect in 2019. So for me, the opportunity, I actually had this need to make the knowledge, the concepts that I've been teaching in the corporate environment accessible to people who weren't able to pay the fees that a company could pay to train their employees. So when I got the invite from my colleagues, from Tudor, Anca, and Dorin at that time, who were actually clients in IBM, who said, this is really interesting. What would you think about making a podcast about neuroscience applied to day-to-day life? They said, oh, wonderful, because that would make the information free. So we did that. I said yes, I was open to their proposal. We launched the first season, and in 1 month after launching, it became the most listened to podcast in Romania, period. It was before YouTube's glory days. So we're talking more about Spotify and iTunes. We added YouTube in 2020, not 2019. Now, for me, I was very happy, but I wasn't expecting anything. So I think one of the good things was that I came with zero expectations. In my mind, if people who attended my trainings in the companies would listen to the episodes as a follow-up, as a refresh, I would have been happy with that. I actually was contemplating at the time building an app called Fellow Traveler for people who wanted to stay connected to the training concepts and practice and stuff after we met in the training room. So Mind Architect was a very organic and natural extension of my work in that sense. But what I wasn't expecting, in any case, was for it to become sort of a local phenomenon in Romania. Like I experienced things like people stopping me on the street and thanking me for the work that we do, which is still something that fills my heart with joy and gives me dopamine flashes whenever I experience it. I've experienced things that I wouldn't thought were possible. Like I remember I was in London on a vacation with my wife at the time and a friend. We were at a stoplight. I was speaking in Romanian with them, and somebody in London said, "You're Paul Olteanu from Mind Architect. And I was like, yes. I've been listening to the podcast. I've been here for this amount of time with my family. It really helped. I wasn't expecting that, So that was part of the success story and the unexpected result, let's say. It was very heartwarming and satisfying that something that we were doing had that type of impact. With the training and coaching part of the business, we would get feedback like that, but from people you'd actually work with for 3 days or 6 months or a year in a program and stuff like that. So the thing that was really unexpected was getting it from a lot of people, from unknown people all around the country, and it seems in some cases from the outside of the country. Now, the dark side to that, because I need to speak about this also, was that because it started as a hobby project, I was doing that in my spare time with these 3 co-founders that I had, Dorin, Tudor, and Danca. We launched the first season, recording it, I don't know, in lunch breaks or in the evening after we'd finish our work, each of us, whatever we were doing. I didn't actually schedule time in my calendar for work at Mind Architect. Back at the time, I had something like 180 training days per year, which is insane. I would never recommend to anybody, including myself, to go there again, but I have a personality with a lot of energy. I was very young at the time. And in all cases, I was riding the wave. There was a lot of interest. There was a lot of demand. 180 training days per year. Let's say an average of above 150 each year for some years. And when Mind Architect came into my professional life, I didn't schedule time for it. I would do it in the lunch break, in the evening, so on and so forth. When it was a hobby project in the first year, let's say, it was doable. The content was made up already from the training programs. For example, the first season of Mind Architect are basically the first 2 days of my neuroscience of communication training. So it was already, I could deliver it even if it would wake me up at 1 in the morning. I knew the slides, I can close my eyes and I know the flow of the slides. But after the first 2 seasons, we started growing the project. We hired a first project manager, the first employee. We hired a social media team that would help us with Instagram and LinkedIn and other mediums to spread the episodes. We got a sponsor, the bank, OTP Bank, which was our sponsor for, I think, 4 out of 7 years of our existence. So it started growing. And I need to confess that I never scheduled time for any of it. Like, I would do the training business, which was my core activity and still is. And on top of that, Mind Architect kept growing, the media part of the business. And basically, I was having 2 full-time jobs simultaneously, which, as you can imagine, and other people listening to us, was very taxing on my nervous system. It was exhausting. I had very few time for my personal life, things which eventually came to bite, let's say.
And who noticed this first? Like, it was you, your colleagues, your partner?
There were 2 types of feedback. My partner at the time was concerned, borderline with critical. Like, you're working all the time, you never spend time with me, you never find time for disconnecting. And she was right. Looking in hindsight, even though at the time I was so fixated, so tunnel vision with a discourse and some beliefs from this mindset of, if I'm not doing it, who's gonna do it if I'm not gonna do it? Do you think I enjoy working up until this hour, but who's gonna pay the bills? Who's gonna pay the salary? So I had this feeling that I have no choice but to continue working like that. That was one side of the story. The other part was that it was giving me a lot of happy chemicals. Dopamine, adrenaline, excitement, connection with people. So it was very nurturing on a lot of levels, but it was very taxing on the nervous system. So the first person who I remember Pointing this out to me was my partner at the time, which I was completely opaque to acknowledging this. Other people in my life observed it, but they were very appreciative of it. I'm going to give you an example. They said things like, if I would have a day like you, I had a day where I had a training from 10 to 6, from 7 to 9 or 8:30 I had a live, and then another one.
Oh my God.
It was one day like that. And my colleague said, don't understand how you can be coherent after speaking for 12 hours almost non-stop, because in the lunch break I would talk to them and stuff like that. And the sneaky part is that I felt good because they were saying that. It's like, I'm special. I can work this hard. Few people can do what I do, which might be true or might have been true at the time. I couldn't do that probably, or even if I could nowadays, I wouldn't. And I would feel the cost. At that time, that was a very interesting thing about being disconnected from the body. Even though I played professional volleyball from the 5th grade up until the 12th grade, I have a relationship with movement and sports. I was so disconnected from my body that I didn't felt tired. I would sleep. I would wake up in the morning and felt I needed to sleep more. I didn't feel rested enough. But I said, yeah, that's normal. We drink 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 coffees. We start again. And I did this for some years, up until I think in 2022, my nervous system finally sent me the bill. In the sense that after 3 years, 2019, 2021, and 22, 3 to 4 years of working like that, I started being more and more irritated and frustrated from small things. I remember that if I saw the handle of my office door being touched from the outside, like somebody wanted to come in, my heart rate would go up regardless of who it was. When my phone started ringing or vibrating, because it's on silent for almost 20 years, I think. But when it was vibrating, it didn't matter who was calling, I felt annoyed, which are classical symptoms of an exhausted nervous system. I started to lose the capacity to self-regulate. For example, some of the most awful fights that I had were in the couple's relationship, all of them happening in the evening, after working 12, 14 hours with zero body budget left, energy, and not being able to self-regulate, not being able to choose my words wisely, and so on and so forth. And that was the moment when, all of the literature, and if you have a passion of reading biographies, you see that usually success, especially that appears to appear overnight, usually has a lot of cost behind it. And in 2022, I felt it. I had between the 1st of May and the 18th of May in 2022, I lost 7 kilograms in 2 weeks without doing anything differently. I ate the same, I slept the same, I worked out the same. I lost 7 kilograms just because of the overload of my nervous system. Like it melted. And it wasn't just fat, it was muscles, there were things that went away. So after the body said no, Gabor Mate.
Yeah.
After the body said no, and also getting feedback from several people, colleagues, my parents, whom I visited not very often at that time, but my mom would say, you're very angry all the time, you're very irritated all the time. Plus my former partner, that's when I decided that I need to take a break. And 2013 was a year when I took a break, not because I was wise, but because I didn't have a choice. I felt that if I'm not doing this, worse things are going to happen.
Yeah, but first of all, unfortunately, it sounds very familiar.
I can imagine.
And probably not, yeah, exactly. People in the audience, me, and a lot of people that I know. And we often arrive at that point without understanding what we can do to overcome this. So you mentioned some signs, like obviously the outside eyes, which often can see us way better than ourselves. And then the internal signs, when the body never lies, right? Like
Mhm.
it sends you signals, it sends you things that you need to pay attention, not just maybe weight loss, but that irritation that you constantly
Exactly.
have.
Frustration, irritability, difficulty in self-regulating, compulsions. I also, during that time, I felt the need to smoke a lot. I'm not a smoker, but I felt the need to eat on an emotional basis. For example, I wasn't necessarily hungry, but I would eat to regulate my emotions. Smoking was part of my life at that time. So these are signs that our nervous system needs something to be different. And if I'd had more time, because that was the interesting thing, because my life was so crowded with activities, meetings, recordings, training, speaking, a lot of stuff that I appreciated. I want to underline this idea. You can get burned out by doing only things that you love. You don't need to do things you hate in order to get burned out. Of course, if you do things you hate, you get burned out easier, faster. But you can do 90% things you love, which was my case. And still, if you don't give your nervous system time to regenerate, sleep. You know, in Romanian, we have the expression of să zaci, which is to be idle, to do nothing. Nothing was not part of my life at that time. So I would either sleep or do something all the time. Those things were pleasant subjectively. I felt energized, but it's like a car that the pedal is down, you press the accelerator to the end of it, and it starts consuming a lot of fuel, oil, electricity, depending on the car, and you don't feel getting depleted in time because you do not have free space in your life to be able to reflect and observe. I did zero meditation, zero time for myself, to observe my own thoughts, which was very different from what I experienced when I took a break. When I took a break, I started to get more in touch with my body and see that, okay, I wake up each morning feeling tired. When I think about recording an episode, I feel energy leaving my body, which was another sign that I've had enough. I needed a break. Because again, one example is that because of the success of the podcast, I felt the need to do more. Let's do series. Let's do, 24 episodes a year, plus series, plus premium content, plus riding the wave, And my main advice for people who resonate, if they find this relatable, is to take time and get in touch with their bodies, either through meditation, body scans, go to massage, because from a neuroscience perspective, when you activate the body and you move your attention towards physical sensation, that also gives you a better capacity of being able to observe what you feel emotionally. So the body never lies, but in order to listen to the body, you need to feel it. In order to be able to do that, you need to have space, time, focus on that.
And that's one thing that I struggled with, like literally standing still without doing anything. Like, oh, but I might need to reply to that email or that message, or I need to be useful in somehow. Like personally, and I think if I remember correctly, in one of your episodes, you mentioned the fact that, how you call it, when you
mistake appreciation for love.
Yes,
Probably.
But yeah, that's the one. Like, and
Yeah.
because all the time, like when you're trying to help someone, like you're chasing external approval instead of being content with what you are and what you do, and you neglect yourself.
Yeah. Let's bring this conversation into the real world, let's say, because, when you listen to a lot of personal development stuff or read stuff, you need to love yourself unconditionally. You need to be happy and respect yourself for just being, not doing, which are wonderful ideas. But most of us had childhoods and live in life contexts that do not show us love because we exist and do not show us respect because we are members of the human race. It would be wonderful to make steps towards such a world, but we're not there yet. Now, if you come from a family or a culture where relaxing and idleness were equated with losing time or being lazy, which I experienced, probably you experienced. In Romanian, we also have expressions like tai frunză la câini, which is impossible to translate. It basically means cutting leaf for the dogs, like wasting time. Which, when I was doing non-productive stuff, I remember in my childhood, my mother would appear in the frame of the door and she would say, "What are you doing? You're cutting leaves to the dogs again." And other more severe ways of inviting me to be productive. And as the nervous system learns through repetition and association, that's part of how our implicit unconscious memory works, I learned to associate idleness with anxiety. Because when I would do nothing productive, my nervous system from past experience would anticipate pain. As such, I remember a vacation, for example, that I had in Italy. I was in Siena, which is a wonderful medieval city, full of old buildings and nice sights and so on and so forth. And I would walk the street in that wonderful medieval Italian city, updating my LinkedIn profile with the latest professional checkpoints that I achieved. So it was that bad. I'm not judging myself or anybody who's doing it. I want the people who are listening or watching this episode to understand where it comes from. And an even deeper level than repetition and association in associating idleness or relaxation with danger, a parent, a teacher, a mix between a parent and a teacher who'd always invite you to be productive. I was raised in a family where, looking at my parents, they wouldn't rest. They themselves did not have moments of, okay, I did enough today, let's relax. That was something that happened when you sleep or on vacation. And that was it. On top of that, those of us who experienced childhoods where we didn't get this feeling of unconditional love, the unicorn, the emotional unicorn of unconditional love, which is possible when you're a child if you have a very wise parent. Your parent might be able to give you this message, verbally, explicitly, or implicitly, that regardless of how you behave, I love you and you're safe with me. That doesn't mean I accept anything that you do, but regardless of how you behave, you are loved and you are safe. Most of us didn't experience that growing up. Because my nervous system didn't have a reference of unconditional love, so I don't know how that feels like, consciously or unconsciously. I didn't know how that felt like. What I did experience in childhood a lot was appreciation or recognition based on performance. If I had good grades in school, if I behaved in a certain way, if I would clean my room, if I would be first in sports, I would see my parents' eyes light up, or their tone be more enthusiastic, or explicitly saying you're the smartest in the class, you're the strongest on the playing field, or whatever. So what does our brain do? It learns to misunderstand appreciation for love. We all want to feel loved and we all want to feel appreciated. But if you don't have a reference that you're loved regardless of how you perform, the next best thing to love was the appreciation, the recognition that I would get when I would behave in a certain way. So that's what my nervous system learned. Work for appreciation, work for recognition. And this is where the media part of the business is really sneaky. Because in the training business, I would deliver a speech or a training program or coaching session, and I would get appreciation, but it would be from the specific group or person I worked with, limited in space and time. With the media part of the business, I would put a podcast episode out, and recognition and appreciation would keep flowing for days. Comments, shares, so on and so forth. So you see, it's very seductive and is very perverse in a way, because it keeps feeding into this habit, into this mechanism of my nervous system. You don't know how it feels unconditional love, but you know how it is to work for appreciation, so work for appreciation. And another pattern that I observed back then is that the less I felt loved in my couple's relationship because of the criticism that I'm working too much, which was again true, the more I would work. which is another interesting thing, because when people are showing you the mirror, dude, there's something a little bit off in the way that you're living. You're working 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day. You don't take time for rest. You don't take time for being. You're not present. Even when you're on vacation or with loved ones, you think about work. The more I heard that, the more I went in activities that gave me the opposite. That was criticism. So let's go towards work where I get appreciation.
But in that sense, then, how can someone tell the difference between healthy achievement and using achievement to earn your worth?
You see, 15 minutes or 50 minutes, what we proposed is probably not going to be enough to cover that. But the simple answer is this from my point of view. When we're operating from a healthier space, I wouldn't say healthy necessarily, but a healthier space, it's a space where my involvement, my work, my performance is not dependent on what I get from the outside world in terms of appreciation. For example, I'm doing this podcast with you because I want to give, I want to share, I want to help people by way of my experience. I don't care. I won't even read comments, shares, likes, so on and so forth. And that was exactly what I felt when I started Mind Architect. It came from a space where I want to give, no strings attached. If 10 people listen to this or watch this, I'm going to be happy. I couldn't even imagine 100,000 people listening or watching. I just want to give. That's healthy. The follow-up to that is that when I felt tired, I would stop. When I felt I don't have inspiration or I don't have something relevant to say, I'm okay not saying it. In time, when appreciation, recognition, for some people money, start being the main motivators, you don't operate from this space of I want to give. You operate from the space of I need to receive something in return for what I'm giving. May it be recognition, appreciation, money, whatever. And the difference is in how much anxiety you feel. When we're operating from a space of feeling the void, like in all addictions mask, a form of wound, a form of pain. When I'm working to fill the void, I feel anxiety when I'm not working. When I'm working out of passion, not to fill the void, but because I want to do this, I'm okay not doing it from time to time. I'm okay going on vacation. I'm okay sleeping. I'm okay having a talk with a good friend. I'm okay being present in my couple's relationship because I know that tomorrow I can continue working on something I love is going to be there. So for me, that's the probably subtle thing, the nuanced thing, the gray area thing. So what I'm doing, is it mainly powered by desire, by the feeling of giving back, of, putting this out into the world, no strings attached? Or is it fueled by the fear of what happens if I don't do it? The anxiety of, okay, I'm putting this episode out, but let's be very careful with the title and thumbnail and what I'm saying so it's going to get views. I feel a very big difference between the two. Now, one last thing I want to say on this topic is that if you listen, for example, to people who are much better performance than any of us, for example, Toto Wolff, who is the co-owner and director of the Mercedes Formula One team, who in a funny way has a Romanian background because his father comes from Romania and his mother is Polish. Why am I bringing him up is because Mercedes-Benz was 8-time world champion in constructors and the 7-time world champion in drivers with Lewis Hamilton. Asked several times in different podcasts, where does this drive come from? Where does the ability to become 8-time consecutive world champion in 8 consecutive years, which is unheard of in any team sports or in individual sports actually? Toto Wolff would say, the drive for this, without question, comes from trauma and shame. So from my point of view, performance like becoming the world's first trillionaire, 8-time consecutive world champion, so on and so forth, cannot be fueled just by light. There needs to be some darkness, which is never feeling good enough, trying to prove to yourself or to the world that you're worthy, feeling that you're not worthy and not worthy of existing unless you do this or that. So this type of dark energy, you see it in all biographies. May it be Andre Agassi, if you read Open, his biography, Toto Wolff from Mercedes, if you read, I don't know, Sergiu Celibidache in The Yellow Tie, if you watch the movie. All of them have a background of learning at some point in their life that if you don't X, Y, Z, perform, do this, do that, work all the time, you're not worthy of being safe, of feeling loved, of something like that. From my point of view, performance is possible from a more bright side, let's say, but not at that level. Because the amount of energy you need to put in to create the first iPhone, to be 8-time consecutive world champion, to be the first trillionaire, needs a level of sacrifice, of enduring pain, of, forcing yourself that a person who has a regulated nervous system would not put themselves through.
Man, so true. And like, when you put it in that perspective, you're like, yeah, it makes sense, because who else will sacrifice so much to achieve that success? And on the other note is like recognizing a pattern, it's one side of the things, but actually regulating the nervous system and recovering, because often when people listen to conversation like this, probably they already went through the problem, or they're already there inside the problem. They're burnout or maybe depression and so on. And how you rebuild from there, because you took 1 year off and then you start the rebuild.
I need to put a caveat in that, because people listening to he took a year off might say, well, he has the luxury of taking a year off. He has the privilege of taking a year off. It wasn't exactly 1 year off in the full sense of the word, in the sense that I continued doing training and speaking in private context, companies, teams, so on and so forth, to pay the bills and also to keep my mind occupied. I didn't do anything related to mind architect or media production. So my second job of the 2 full-time jobs was put on a pause. My colleagues took care of the company, and at that point, in my mind, it was, if it works without me for 1 year, very good. If not, I'm willing to let it end. In my mind, I had this clarity that I can't go on living like this. I don't want to work 14, 16 hours a day. I don't want to be frustrated or irritated out of all of the small things that came to produce that response in me. I don't want to lose my relationships because I didn't have time to see people. I would, if, for example, we had this talk in 2021, let's say, I would say, I'm available in 6 months from 1 to 3 if you come to the place where I'm going to tell you, if it was a physical meeting. That was my life at the time. I didn't have time to be sick. Some people say, I don't have time to die. I don't have time to be sick. It was true. Like, I needed to schedule being sick in the calendar. I'm semi-joking, but it's funny or not funny in a way that I would get sick only on vacations, because that was when my nervous system was less sympathetically activated. I was less in fight or flight and engage all the time. And then all of the things that built up, like muscle spasms or other things, they would appear in vacation when there was time for them. So, to your question, you don't need to take a full year off, from my point of view, in order to recover, but you need to understand that our nervous system works on a body budget. This is a concept from Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's a neuroscientist, who basically says that everything that our nervous system does, it does in order to manage our body budget. Now, we have 2 pedals, the sympathetic branch of the nervous system, which is the acceleration, the parasympathetic branch, which is the brake. And people who have those convictions of, I'm never good enough, I need to perform in order to feel safe or loved, I need to do this, I need to do that all the time, they're stuck in sympathetic activation. Sympathetic activation also has a tendency to narrow the scope of your attention instead of broadening it. Divergent, creative, lateral thinking. Sympathetic activation does convergent, focused attention on one thing, tunnel vision. So the main idea from a neuroscience perspective is to move from sympathetic to parasympathetic activation. Now, practically, what you can do. For me, the transition between 2022 and 2023 was the worst year of my life by far. I ended the relationship I had for 9 years. I got a divorce because of everything that had happened, not just because of working, but primarily because of the quality of my nervous system from 2020 to 2022. My mother got sick and she got a cancer diagnosis in April 2023. So that came on top of that, and I lost the main partner for the podcast. The bank that has been with me as a sponsor for 4 years got sold. It's not that they didn't want to continue or that I did something bad, but they sold their operations in Romania, and as such, I lost the main partner. All of these things happened in an interval of 6 months. I'm sharing this not for sympathy or anything like that, but to help people understand that it was very bad. Very taxing on the nervous system. Now, what helped were the following things. I prioritized sleep non-negotiably. I slept somewhere between 7, 8, 9, 10 hours per day on a weekly average, let's say, not each night, but that was something I prioritized because I knew the neuroscience and neurobiology of sleep. And if you want to improve anything in your life, physical performance, mental performance, self-regulation, empathy, anything you want to improve, sleep helps. Lack of sleep makes everything worse. Emotion regulation, memory, attention. I highly recommend people watching, Matt Walker's podcasts or reading his book. There's a lot of content on the importance of sleep nowadays out there. So I leveraged that. I took care of my sleep. The second thing I did, which is from research, the second best thing you can do to regulate your nervous system is physical movement. The research says this: between 3 to 5 sessions of 45 minutes of intense physical movement per week, 3 to 5 times 45 minutes per week, that's the sweet spot. In that period of my life, I would go to one form or another of movement. It might have been gym 2 or 3 times a week, running, biking, but I would do that religiously. Not because I wanted to lose calories or put on muscle, that's a bonus. I did that primarily to regulate my nervous system because for hundreds of millions of years, when mammals felt threatened, stress levels going up, the way that they would address that would be by moving. And if you move after you are stressed and you are still alive, your nervous system says, okay, you don't need these stress hormones anymore, let's go back to homeostasis. So sleep and movement were my first 2 go-to pillars, were the most important 2 things that I did. Other things that I did, practical, tactical things, were social connection, which there's a lot of research on how important social connection is, but practically, I met up with friends in the presence of whom I could be myself. So I met up less with clients, less with, we all have people in our lives that we're meeting because they might be useful to us or we might be useful to them. Those types of relationships. I limited the amount of interaction that was with those people, and I met up more with people that even if I was sad, even if I didn't feel like speaking that much, even if, I would go on a rant, they would be there accepting a safe relationship. I prioritize those. Actually, when people would message me or phone me, it was interesting that my body would give me instant feedback. Some people, when I read their messages, I felt calm or energized, while with other people, I felt that energy would go away from my body. And that was a very good compass. Spend more time with these people, spend less time with these people. Another thing that I did that helped me a lot, I would say, was walking and staying in nature. I spent part of the time in a mountain city in Romania. I live in Bucharest, in the capital, but I would spend much more time in Brașov, which is a city in the mountains. And there's a neuroscience part to it, because for our nervous system, when you are high and when your eyesight has perspective, when you see things in perspective, like sky and differences in height, in level, it calms the nervous system down. Maybe people who are listening or watching us have been high on a mountain, being able to see far away, and you'd see your nervous system calming down. A cubicle, a place that's narrow where you can see walls, closed perspective, has a tendency to raise sympathetic activation, to focus and agitate. While cathedral effects, you go into a cathedral where you have perspective, there's a lot of space, there's room to breathe and to see, it calms the nervous system down. And that's also something that was part of my life at that time. And one last thing that I would mention here, having or taking time to just be with myself, like having moments when I wouldn't watch TV, I wouldn't listen to podcasts, I wouldn't read books, I would just be with myself while walking, for example, helped me get more in touch with what I was feeling. And what I realized is that part of the exhaustion that I felt, the feeling of being tired, was because my nervous system was busy repressing a lot of emotion. Specifically, in my case, it was a lot of sadness. I had the life context that required of me, or at least that's what I said in my head, to eliminate parts of my life. Eliminate play, because I don't have time to play. Eliminate interacting with people that my partner at the time found dangerous for our couple's relationship. Not speaking to some people because she found them threatening, and a lot of other things like this. And all of these micro losses, not playing, not speaking to people that I wanted to maintain a relationship with, I don't know, visiting my parents less, and other things that were a mix between my life context, the amount of work that I was doing, my couple's relationship, all of those micro losses added up to a lot of sadness, because sadness is the feeling that helps us metabolize loss, helps us deal with loss. And because I needed to remain functional and work, I didn't have time to feel all that sadness. And in the year that I took off, 2023, I got in touch with all of that sadness. I had some plant assisted sessions where I cried for 9 hours.
Whoa.
Yeah, but at the end of crying for 9 hours, I never cried like that in my life, and it was something I embraced and looked forward to. I wanted to experience that. I felt, I don't know how to say this in English correctly, like mountains lighter. I felt like I had mountains in terms of weight on my shoulders, and after crying for 9 hours, I felt lighter. All of these things helped. Sleep and movement helped me remain functional. Connecting with people that were good for me, taking time to see what I actually feel and think, what I want to continue doing, what I don't want to continue doing. So time to reflect. Reflective activity needs mental power and space. That also helped feeling everything that I needed to feel. May it be sadness, fear, anger, making room for processing emotions was excellent, because after about 6 months of getting in touch with everything that I've been avoiding to feel, may it be with psilocybin, with the active substance in mushrooms, which in my case helped, but you can do it with music. You can do it, I don't know, in retreats, which are not plant assisted. Whatever works. But feeling what you need to feel, feeling what you've been avoiding to feel, that helped a lot, because after 6 months, in a way, I emptied the bag. After 6 months, with the same songs that would immediately get me to tears in the past, I didn't feel like crying anymore. I felt calm. And after those 6 months, let's say from November 2022 up until about May 2023, 3, I started energy coming back into the system. I started feeling the energy coming back. I started missing work a little bit. Like I felt like doing episodes. I felt I had ideas again. I felt creative again. I felt the need to meet up with people again. In the first 6 months, very few people, mostly with myself and very close people or family. But in about 6 months, I felt the need to interact again, me being an extrovert in terms of temperament. So those were the things that worked. I'm sorry for such a long answer, but those were the things.
It's a very practical one, because once you quote unquote fix the biological and psychological part of it, now you are prepared to fix the business or how you show up in the business. What practical things have you done in Mind Architect after you went back?
One thing I'd feel the need to say before addressing this is that I think it's an ongoing process. I wouldn't say I fixed everything or anything in that part. What I did was some house cleaning in terms of feeling what I was avoiding, in resting. But it's not like now I'm not feeling the pull of confusing love for appreciation and working to get appreciation, but I'm more aware of it. And I can stop it because now I have enough energy and I prioritize sleep and movement. I don't need to get to that point again in order to be aware of the things I learned then. But what I want to underline is this idea that our nervous system is not broken or fixed. It's a continuum. And you gravitate towards more familiar patterns or newer patterns. In order to go more towards something new, you need to have energy, because change requires energy for the nervous system. Now, in the business, a few things have changed. And I'm going to try to speak very practically. One of the things that changed in that year of taking a break is that I reflected on what gives me energy in terms of my work. And at that time, I chose to do less corporate projects because I was, in a way, tired of people who are being sent by their managers or leaders to the trainings and didn't want to be there. I didn't feel like working with that audience that much anymore. I focused more on open trainings, on conferences where people would actually pay the ticket and they were motivated to be there. So that was one thing. I started addressing topics in the podcast that interested me more, like I did at the beginning. At some point, we shifted from what actually I was curious and interested in to what the audience might be interested in. And that, from my point of view, was a mistake, because for me it felt much more like work and it was much more taxing on my nervous system to research and talk about things that I wasn't actually interested in. So that was another shift. Because I saw that the business survived without me for 1 year, it didn't prosper, but it worked. Without me, it worked for 1 year. My colleagues started also appearing more as hosts in the media productions, and I said, okay, we can do episodes that I'm not part of. We can have a colleague of mine as host and an expert. Stuff like that. So that also was something that happened. Another thing that happened in that period was we optimized some costs and business lines that were not wise to exist, because in the growth part of the business, when we grew, like overnight, we had more money than we could spend, especially because we had one employee and some people who would share dividends if any were available at the end of the year. And there were, let's say, 2 or 3 years where we grew based on riding the wave of enthusiasm, interests, and stuff that was happening around the podcast. And when that started to go down, because more podcasts appear that talked about what we were talking about, or I don't know, the media landscape just got more crowded, we didn't readjust the costs. So we had diminishing earnings with the same amount of costs as when the earnings were much higher. So another thing in that year, I really reflected, okay, what out of all of the things that we started doing, for example, we had a shop that was selling, I don't know, t-shirts with Mind Architect, bracelets, agendas, and stuff like that, merchandise. which from its first month of existence up until to its last month was on minus. It produced loss each month. But in that year, we said, okay, let's stop. Let's cut it. Even if we have earnings to sustain the loss from other business lines that are profitable, let's stop. So that was another thing. And one very practical thing I want to share this mandatory that for me made a lot of difference. I still had training, coaching, speaking, recordings, team management meetings, and so on and so forth, but I started structuring them in different days in the calendar. In the past, I would have a training. In the lunch break of the training, I would have a recording. And in the evening, I would have, a team meeting. Now, if I have a training, I have just a training in that day. Tomorrow, we have the recording and maybe a team meeting. The next day, I have time to create or document podcast episodes. So structuring it like that in my calendar was a very smart and neuroscience informed move, because what was really exhausting for me wasn't necessarily the amount of work, although that was a little bit exaggerated, was switching from one to another, like going from a training on, communication psychology to a discussion in the team about titles and thumbnails, to then recording, an episode about memory, to, creating a deck for a sponsorship request. The task switching was really exhausting. Now I know, okay, today we're going to talk about creating decks for sponsors. The entire day, I'm going to focus my attention on this. Even if I still work 8 hours, I consume less energy than if I went from one to another. And that really made a difference. And also in my calendar, I color coded it. And there's a color that's green, that are days for time off, vacations, or physical therapy, like going to massage, kinetotherapy, and stuff like that, which are non-negotiable. The green parts of my calendar, nobody can touch them. There are other color codes that can be touched by my colleagues and schedule stuff, but not those. And having these clear boundaries on the green parts of my calendar actually really made a difference, because in the past, I would only go, for example, to kinetotherapy when I would have a problem. It's like going to the dentist only when you have a very bad ache, or going with your car to the mechanic only when it breaks. No, now I go weekly, or if I can't go weekly, at least once every 2 weeks, I do a form of self-care. And in terms of mindset, it really helped me to look at people who manage to remain performant sustainably, like Federer, or people who really manage to do it for the long run, and they take time off. They sleep, they take care of what they eat, they take care of recovery time, which might mean massage, walking, time off. And I started looking at those things not as being lazy or cutting grass cutting leaf to the dogs, but as an investment in sustainable performance, which is very different.
True, because this saying that you cannot pour from an empty glass, right?
Absolutely.
And if you don't take care of yourself, who will?
Yep. It's a very personal saying to me, because, for example, my mom's cancer diagnosis came after 1 year of having some symptoms which were obvious of being something wrong there, and for 1 year she didn't go to the doctor because she always had other things to do, other people's priorities, my grandmother's, my father's, sometimes mine, because she's doing some accounting in the company. So for me, this is not just in theory something that I believe in, that is very difficult to give to others from a space of being depleted, but I know it from practice, from my mother's life experience, from my life experience, that if you give up until, there's the difference, exactly what you were asking. Healthy is giving while you have. Unhealthy is sacrificing yourself in order to give to others. Which, from my point of view, okay, maybe we sacrifice from time to time ourselves in relationship to our children, because we want to be good parents even when we're tired, even when we're, exhausted. But even there, it's not sustainable. Because if I don't sleep, if I don't take care of my body, I'm gonna be snappy. I'm gonna be, I don't know, a parent that's not the best nervous system to be around.
And usually towards the end, ask a question like, what can listeners do in 1 week to change something? But I assume it's taking care of your sleep.
Sleep, movement, guys. Movement is very important. So if you read biographies, if you watch podcasts with people that you respect and you admire for being good at something, you're gonna see that those that are able to do it long term have a movement practice in their life. May it be walking for 45 minutes 3 times a week, 3 to 5 times a week, which requires no subscription to the gym. It's free. Yeah. So movement, if you think about the benefits of movement as being memory, cognitive performance, improving your attention, better self-regulation, not burning calories and making muscles, which is again a bonus, I would prioritize movement higher up on the ladder. And the mindset shift that really made the difference for me was to become aware of the fact that I have a tendency to work, because for my nervous system, working a lot is justifying being alive. I need to work to justify my existence. That's the unconscious old belief that I grew up with. Observing that and saying, okay, I want to work because it brings me satisfaction, it brings me meaning, it brings me impact, it brings me recognition, it brings me money. I want to do that. But it's legitimate. It's actually necessary to rest, to have idle time. It really made a shift in my mind, because now when I'm not being productive, I'm looking at that as an investment in my future ability to continue being professionally relevant. And from my point of view, I know it's a cliche, but this idea that our life, our professional life or our career is a marathon, not a sprint. I think that today that matters even more, because if you think about it, if you become sick, regardless of how much money you have in the bank, is going to cost you a lot to try to become healthy again, in terms of being out of the office, in terms of paying bills to rebuild your health. So those 45 minutes per day of movement, or watching your sleep, or cutting down alcohol or smoking or stuff like that, is an investment, a very practical investment in your net worth at the end of your life, if that's what makes your boat float. If you want to be a better parent or a better life partner, I feel the need to say this, as a professional educator, let's say, for adults. Most adults don't have difficulties in improving their lives because they don't know the theory, or they haven't read books or podcasts or attended enough trainings. They aren't able to do the things that they read, listen to, or hear about in conversations like ours, because their nervous system is exhausted. So an exhausted nervous system cannot put anything into practice. All the knowledge in the world is equal to zero if you have a nervous system that is depleted. So first, let's keep the nervous system, I'm not going to say all of the time, in optimum stress or relax, but let's not keep it depleted. Let's make sure we don't go into red. Green, yellow, orange, okay, not red, on an imaginary stress curve. And if we manage to do that, we're gonna be better parents, better life partners, wiser leaders, better business people. So those would be the ideas.
And cannot thank you enough for sharing this. For those listening that resonates, where they can find you?
So for mostly Romanian speaking bunch, paulolteanu.ro is the main headquarters website. The podcast is called Mind Architect. We have some English episodes with Gabor Mate. We have 2 episodes with Gordon Neufeld, who, for example, is a psychotherapist with 50 years of clinical experience, who has 5 kids and 7 nephews. So a lot of practice there, not just theory. Daniel Siegel, with Luke Schniewski. There are some English episodes. If people didn't get sick of my voice in our conversation, they can listen to more there. My international presence, I'd say, would be LinkedIn, because that's the English version of the profile. All of my work can be done internationally also, but I try to focus on the Romanian audience, especially with the media part of the business, because in English, there are a lot of resources. From Huberman, who I highly recommend to anybody interested in the neurobiological part of how the mind works, how the brain works, to your podcast, to, I don't know, Joe Rogan, Diary of a CEO, so on and so forth. While maybe it's an invitation for the audience, if you focus on your specific background, for me, one of the feedback that we get recurringly from the Mind Architect audience is that it's useful for them that the examples given in the podcast have their cultural background. Growing up in a communist country, tăiat frunză la câini, cutting leaf to the dogs, and such things are relatable from people who have a specific geographical or cultural background. So I think that even if the ideas are the same or are maybe not new, adapting them to the specific of the audience can really help.
Yeah, because that cultural perspective sometimes it makes all the difference. Like, I remember when I was searching for a therapist, I was using platforms like BetterHelp and so on, and they couldn't understand my cultural background until I found a Romanian therapist to work with. And that's why, like, it can make a big difference.
That's my feeling also, and especially if you're entrepreneurs or solopreneurs and people who come into this way of working, in my experience, usually have a tendency to value autonomy or to value, I don't know, being your own person, having your own resources, growing, wanting to scale. From my point of view, it's really useful to either go in coaching or in therapy to see where they come from. I'm not saying that it's bad to want to grow or want to scale or want to, create an empire. Wonderful. What's the fuel driving it? Is it an authentic joy of your heart to bring those things into the world, and that's what gives you energy and that's what fuels you? Or is it the thing that you've learned at some point that if it's not big, it's not worthy? If it's not perfect, it doesn't matter. If I'm not moving all of the time, I get in touch with feelings that I don't know how to process. And that's why I'm in a constant, agitation and feeling. And I just want to say one last thing, building on what you've said, that the body always tells the truth. Not only is it true, but having a podcast and a media company that's called Mind Architect, focusing a lot on the mind, what I can share is that the mind is very good at lying to you. Like, our mind has a tendency to change our thoughts based on how we feel. So if I'm having a good day at the office and things are happening well in the company today, I say, yes, I'm doing exactly what I should be doing. This is the product, this is the industry, this is the team. I have a bad week or a bad month. Why did I need employees? Whoever made me get these rents, and so on and so forth. So the mind changes its discourse based on how we feel. The body, on the other hand, even in the moments when I say, this is it, this is the team, this is the product, if it's not aligned with my values, with who I actually am, with my identity, you feel tired. You feel stiff. You feel rigid. Your body tells you something. And I'm not saying let your body make the decisions, but let your body inform your mind and try to balance what you feel with what you think when making decisions. That's also something that I took away from the year of break, and it helps me even, for example, in saying yes to the interview, because Ioana recommended it and because I resonated with the idea of, okay, a conversation for solopreneurs and entrepreneurs and people going into the wild of entrepreneurship. I want to help. I want to be there. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to see stuff in advance. I just want to do this. So thank you, Gabe, for inviting me and for creating the space and the context for this.
Thank you. And in the name of our audience, another thank you. Cannot thank you enough for this, Paul. And for anyone listening, this was Paul Olteanu on Authority in the Wild. And if this conversation made you think differently about performance and how you show up in your business, you know what to do. Follow Paul's work, Mind Architect. Listen to the episodes. I have a lot of Romanian listeners, so you can listen to all the episodes. And for those that speaks only English, you know what to do. There are some episodes there. This was Game Maruș, ca uitatorii din Wild.